That's loud. 50 watts is loud. That is a 65 AC50 doing 65 AC50 kinds of things. Make it a little less loud for me. And see what other sounds the amp does besides just Beatles. Not a bad sounding little amp. Hope to God so after everything we've been through together this week on it, right? Promise you it's not going to be nothing but one amp every video for forever. I'll end it because it doesn't want to end itself. That sounded morbid. Hey, working player, that was the casino. Hey, Joe B, I'll get to the camera question in a little bit. Let's get through everyone's comments and questions at the beginning. And sorry about flubbing the bit of rain at the intro. And I know that it's not the exact sound. No one can get the exact sound from rain. That was, they played in A really fast and then slowed it down just a little bit to bring it closer to G. And so it changed the texture of everything. Plus, you know, Revolver and Sgt. Pepper, there's so much compression and limiting, and I did not put a Fairchild on here. But I think for just, you know, one mic on an amp, straight into the amp, some reverb, a plate reverb and post. Not a bad sound. I did do a test stream about an hour ago just to make sure it was a pretty good sound. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. It was quite the challenge, but I think it's working. What technically makes a classic DR103 so good? Hiwatt. Hey, Mooney Dude. That would be the fact that at the time it was made, it was the loudest clean amp ever. And it has a character that Fenders don't have. And when it does break up, which I have experienced, and I really recommend earplugs if you do that, it does the live it leads thing, which is really impressive. But that's not its specialty. It's not designed to be a loud, dirty amp. It's designed to be the amp that you can hear yourself cleanly with if you're playing a Coliseum back before we had PAs, hence its association with David Gilmour. And it's a really good platform for pedals and for tone shaping with other devices. But it's just a massive clean sound, which is a cool thing. It's a bit outdated these days. We don't need something to be 120, 150 watts. But at the time, it was pretty impressive. And they still are. They need a lot of TLC. The heater and grounding always needs some tweaking, and the bias is never quite up to the challenge. And especially with more modern wall voltages, the bias can be way off. But it's all doable. If I don't say hello to you by name, it does not mean that I don't see you and appreciate you being here. I just don't need to, I just don't need to take up the entire chat time to call out names. Yeah, as John Hogg says, if you have ads, sorry, then you may be a little bit behind. So push the live button and make sure that, it varies on the phone versus just various screens, but make sure you're all with us, because I've seen a lot of people be consistently 15, 20 minutes behind everyone else. And it probably will give you a better experience of being in the moment with everyone else if you are in sync with us. Thank you, Stuck in the Bit. Yeah, a lot of people are like, hey, he never uses a scope. He doesn't know how to use a scope. I do use a scope. I use a scope when I need to use a scope. I don't need to use a scope very often. And I don't show the scope very often because it requires more answering, more, it raises more questions than I have time to answer. People are like, why didn't you get into this? Why didn't you get into that? Why didn't you get I'm trying to keep the minutes, the videos, 10 to 20 minutes. And so I don't address everything in every video, but I see it as a continuing conversation with my regular viewers. So if you watch my videos long enough, you will get everything. And for specific questions, that's one of the things these Saturday chats are for. Hey, Greg there in St. Louis, and Greg there in Boboski land. Matt down there in South Carolina, thanks very much. Well, if you watch them again and again, maybe you'll understand the technical things, working player. I'm working on it myself. Obviously I should have caught that ground much sooner, but visibly the wire was touching the metal, and it was behind a bunch of other wires and looked like it had solder on it. It turns out that bit of metal was resting against the metal in 1965, was never soldered, and it built up so much corrosion that there was no ground. Fun stuff. Can I give you the lowdown on output impedance in relation to the player and what we hear, as well as electronics and what it does to the signal? Many thanks from the UK. Hey, Stuck in the Bit. Well, it's really complicated, but and I don't want to go. I don't have charts and graphs for this. So there are videos. I think Uncle Doug's got a series on this. In a nutshell, from a player's perspective, most of us are aware that pickups expect to be loaded with a certain impedance, and that if you use a 500K pot, a volume pot on a telly, it'll take your head off, let alone some of the 1 megs from the early 70s. Meanwhile, if you use a 250K pot, in a humbucker, it'll sound dark because it's loading the signal. You have a signal coming out of a coil, so a transformer, that needs an optimal load to be able to transmit efficiently, so that you don't lose highs, you don't lose level. And so the winding of a transformer, much like the winding of a pickup, is done in such a way that it expects to have this number of turns with this primary ratio, because remember, a transformer is basically 2 pickups to get put very, very close together. So energy in one coil excites the other coil. So you have a certain ratio in one coil of an output transformer, say, and another ratio in the second coil, which is the output side. And that number of winds is calculated to give an efficient, good sound if the load is X. So a 4 ohm load versus an 8 ohm load versus 16 ohm load. And so from the player's perspective, you just need to trust that the people designing the transformers and choosing the transformers have done a good job, and that you don't connect a 4 ohm load to a transformer tap that's expecting a 16 ohm load, or vice versa, because then you'll have the same kind of effect, kind of sorta, as having a 1 meg in a telly, it's too bright, or a 250K in a humbucker, it's too dark. Only it can actually have dramatic negative effects on the output tubes and the output section of the amp, because things at higher currents and voltages can go south, whereas this, just when it sounds very good, it won't do any damage if you have the wrong pot. So I think that's probably as far as we need to go in this live context, because I don't have the math handy for this kind of stuff. But from a player's perspective, I think that's what you need to bear in mind. Hey, Ma'am Troth. I love a JTM45. I wish it had a bit more usable bass for guitar. I keep it almost off. Would a Germino Club 40 be a great choice, or do you think the classic 45 would be better? Well, all JTM45s and the Club 40 follow a similar recipe, which is that of the Fender Bassman. And there's a hint in the name there. It has really full low end. More so than other Marshalls aside from the bass and super bass. And there are very easy ways where you can change any JTM45 inspired amp to have tighter lows. You can certainly decrease that silly 330 or 220 microfarad coupling, cathode bypass cap on the first gain stage, the shared gain stage, because that's a silly value. You change that to a 22 if you want it flat down to for guitar frequencies. You can bring that up to like a 4.7 if you want to get tighter. So somewhere between 22 and 4.7 microfarad gives you a good range on that. And then the output coupling caps in that amp are 100 nanofarad. You can change them down to 22s. That'll tighten up the output. And there are a few other places on the circuit where you can make subtle tweaks. No other cathode bypass caps to play around with, but some coupling caps in general. You could decrease the input cap on the phase inverter, for instance, from 22 to a 4.7 nanofarad. And that would tighten up the low end without losing the useful low end. So I don't know if any of those models that you list would be happy for you in stock form, because they are all doing the authentic JTM45 thing, which is derived from the Bassman. Sounds like you might want to try a Marshall 1987, the 50-watt solid state, which has tighter lows. But beware, the 1987 can be really mega bright on the treble channel, hissy, insanely bright. You just lift the 4.7 nanofarad bright cap off the volume and replace it with 100 or 250 picofarad and be happy. Maybe 500 if you want a little bit of that bite and sizzle without the, oh my God, it's so loud and bright. Hey, Joe. My good lady wants to get a camera to photograph birds. What would I recommend secondhand? Thanks again. Brownie points. Well, it's really tricky because if you want to do bird photography, the camera is of secondary importance. You're going to have to get a very typically expensive lens because you want a long telephoto to do birds. You want a long telephoto, and you want to do probably be good to have a very good autofocus and to have a fairly good burst rate, so you can get, make sure the bird's in focus, that you can see the bird. It's not just a little smudge somewhere in the picture, and that you capture, 4 to 12 pictures per second, so that one of those might be really fantastic. And that's what the National Geographic photographers do. If I were recommending that rig for a beginner, or at least on a budget, I would look at Olympus, because you get a much longer lens with the Micro Four Thirds system than you do for much less money, and it's a much less expensive lens. I look at maybe an Olympus 10 or 5 series used. You can probably get one for $300 to $400, and then you can get, remember, the lens that for Olympus Micro Four Thirds, if it's a 100 millimeter lens, it's really a 200 millimeter lens. So Olympus has got some zooms from 1 to 400 millimeters that would give you a really long range. They've got really good autofocus. They would not be my choice for a portrait lens, a portrait camera, but if you're really wanting to save money, that Olympus rig would be great. This what is that model called? Just let me look this up real quick. Olympus OM5. It's the OM5 is the newer one. OMD EM5 and the OMD EM10 are the ones to look at. You can throw a lot of cool money at it. You can get a Sony A7 IV, you can get a Canon R5, R6, you can get a Nikon Z9, but those are much more expensive cameras, even used, and then you have to buy a full frame, really mega expensive lens. So depends on how serious she is. You could always pick up the Olympus rig for about $600 to $700 probably, maybe a little bit more, and if it takes off for her and she just loves it, then she could do the research and make an informed choice about what the really fantastic option would be, but she would still have the resale value of that Olympus lens buying it used, because there are a whole bunch of them out there. They're really good cameras. Sorry for everyone else, but I love that aspect of the world as well. And yeah, Working Player, that was the casino I was playing right at the beginning. It's not quite stock. I saw someone else asking about it. I'll give those details with that. Hey, Greg, if the video came out this morning, that transformer seems to be okay. I guess the sounds that we were hearing was when the amp was experiencing, it's not quite oscillation, and it's not quite blocking or clamping, but when the amp was experiencing that problem and there's an acoustic noise from inside the output transformer, I assumed there was probably just a lamination, which isn't as tight as it once was, but under normal operation, it seems to be fine. But like I said, I'm not sending it back out into the wild until I've done at least 12 hours with a looper playing into a dummy load. If it passes that test and doesn't get hot or anything, then I'll be able to more safely say that I think it is good. But it seems pretty good. Well, the AC50 changed a lot, and it's most famously used by the Beatles, but the Beatles only used it for about 6 months or a year, because they had the 30s, and then they did the 50s, and then they did the 100s, because they needed the 100s. You know, it's very much like the AC30 top boost circuit added to a 50-watt Marshall output section with a paraphase phase inverter and no negative feedback. That's what this version, which is the version 3, the Mark 3. Of course, Mark 3 was within 6 months of the Mark 1, because they were just throwing everything at the wall at the time to see what would work. The first ones were cathode bias, and they tended to overheat. And this one was really stable, had more gain than people wanted, so the latter ones are cleaner. I think this is the one to get if you want one, but there aren't that many of them out there. And as you can tell, sometimes they need a lot of work to keep going. If this thing had been maintained carefully and properly over the decades, it would have been a lot of little bitty services, and nothing this drastic would have been necessary. But if you see the first video on this amp, it came in and the chassis was all mangled and bent and things are broken, and then it had been rebuilt very improperly and then operated with insane conditions, and all kinds of weird band-aids have been added. Band-aid fixes have been tried. So I just had to pretty much start from scratch. And I think tonally, it's worth it. Hey, Brian Larcy. Fantastic. Let's see, Bassman reissue. So you yanked that extra preamp filter cap, I trust, which is a stupid thing. I don't know why they did that. Yeah, but the Bassman reissue, the 59 LTD, is a really good amp. Just needs a little bit of help to get over the finish line. It sounds like you did it. Very good, Brian. Hey, Chris Fit, got a completely untouched AC568 Bassman. Is it wrong to change it over to an AA864 AB165 hybrid with the master volume in the back? Which master volume to use? It depends. If you like the sound of the amp as is, then it would be foolish to change it. The AC568, let's see if I remember that one. I don't want to give you bad advice. Just a second, I'm looking it up. There's so many Bassman variants, and it's hard for me to keep all of them straight. Let's see. Almost there. Bassman. All right. Oh, why does this thing always have to put the thing sideways on me? All right, this is the one with the... All right. It'd be worth your while to change the phase inverter of your existing amp to the AA864 phase inverter, and then see what you think at that point. It needs the same filtering change as the AB165, and that they have a DC mixer, the 220Ks blending the channels, and the two things being mixed with DC on them are coming from different nodes, which undoes the decoupling in the preamp stage. Sorry, I'll be right back with you guys. I'm just looking at this. Other than that, it's not too dissimilar from the AB165 already. In fact, it looks very, very similar, just drawn differently. So, yeah, I think the I think if you just go to the AA864 phase inverter and move the plates feeding the 220K mix resistors to the same node, you'll be much happier with the way that your amp sounds. And that's one of the main things I do in the AB165 videos. There's not a huge difference between the 864 and the AC568 and the AB165. Hey, Cactus Pete. I'm not sure how they got away with it. They tend to get away with it, but when I work on one of those, I do give them 4 screen grids, which is fairly easy to do. Brad's got a video. Brad's Guitar Garage has got a video on that where he shows how he does it, and he does it the same way I do. I don't know if I have Classic 50 videos showing that. I think I might have a Classic 30 video showing that, which is the same thing. Hey, J-Fops, avoid any Supersonics. Current production, originals, whatever. All the Fender Super Sonics are noisy, unreliable beasts, and even when they're not failing, they don't sound very good because they're trying to use a tone stack for 2 different channels with a shared tone stack, and you set one channel to sound good, means the other channel is going to sound bad. You switch it back, you're always going to be chasing your tail. There's not a consistency with that amp. I think it's not very good. Yeah, nowhere, man, you can't really do it with an amp. I mean, it's not just the amp. People try with compressor pedals, but that's Fairchild. That is Fairchild, and I've not heard a pedal do that. Yeah, there are versions of the AC50 which have the long-tailed pair. The Paraphase, I think they just did it so they had more gain. If the amp would be nothing but clean if it had a long-tailed pair, because it doesn't have a lot of gain stages. Well, it would still get kind of dirty. It doesn't have negative feedback, but I think the raunch factor is a big part of that. And it's not a very graceful overdrive. It's kind of grainy. That's that cathodione. I'm sorry, the Paraphase in conjunction with no negative feedback. But you don't get to hear them very often in the world, and they are cool. Hey, C. Scott, that's a 2023 Chinese one that I basically kept the wood and the frets and the tuners, and everything else, all the hardware, all the electronics has been changed. The pickups are Fralins, the pots are Mojotone vintage taper by CTS, Switchcraft. Jack Switchcraft switch, but the Fralins and changing the pots was the big deal. But the bridge was also changed because the stock bridge was horrible. The Elitists are pretty damn good. The best ones I've played that are not vintage were the John Lennon Revolutions, and then the John Lennon model. But the John Lennon model still had the same funky bridge problem. Not the John Lennon, the Korean John Lennon one, not the American one, which are almost as expensive or more expensive than the originals from the 60s now. And the USA one that they came out with in the last 5 years, man, I don't know why they did the Gibson headstock version as opposed to doing the correct headstock. Hey, Aeraholic, I don't know about the high gain 50. Hiwatt has been bought and sold so many times. Different companies put black boxes out on the market with the Hiwatt logo, and different things are inside them. And I've seen some really good things, and I've seen some real horror shows, all of which you pay extra for because of the Hiwatt logo. I would recommend staying to the Dave Reeves era if you can afford it. But there are other options. I mean, a Hiwatt 50-watt head is really freaking loud. So be sure you know what you're getting, even aside from build quality. But I can't approve or disapprove of an amp, the Hiwatt model that I've not had on the bench, because they're so different from each other. Hey, Wes, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Thanks, man. This is a Musicraft, Musicraft Callahan pickguard. These are the Murray pickups I got. You can see the reviews on that. This is an ashtray bridge I got off eBay, which has the notch there so I don't keep breaking my nail. And I did the electronics, and this one's got the full 1-inch down the neck. This is a boat anchor for a lot of people. People can't play this thing because it's big. Well, they think they can't play it, and then 15 minutes later they're playing it fine. Your hand has to adjust to it. But it's stable as hell. Is the hype around the Dumble sound called for? Just another forum talk piece among players. Hey, Sash. Dumbles are really well done. They sound really good. I don't like the way he gooped things. I don't like a lot of the made of unobtainium aspect, and the value among collectors is insane. I think if Dumble had not been in the area where he was, no one would know who he was. And I think the only reason people paid attention to the amps he built was he got them in the hands of players like Carlton and Robin Ford, who, of course, sounded fantastic through them. And so people thought, well, that's the amp they're using. I should buy that. Then I'll sound like them. Well, Carlton's to a lot of us, his best work with Steely Dan was done with the 5E3 Deluxe, not with the Dumble. Robin Ford, his Dumble overdrive hasn't worked in years. He's playing the clean channel with a which is very much like a Fender, with a Zen drive. And Robin Ford would sound every bit as good through a good 60s Super Reverb. You know, there's the amp itself, and Dumbles are good. They're just not $40,000 and up good. And there's the connotations of the amp. If Hendrix, I tell people all the time, if Hendrix hadn't died in 1970, he would have ended up playing, late 70s Fenders with master volumes and ultralinear, and then no one could afford them because people would be chasing, oh, he used that, so therefore I must buy that. So I think Dumbles are great. I don't think Dumbles are worth anything what people pay for them. I could say the same thing for Trainwreck, but scarcity is part of it, and the mystique and the Cool Kids Club and the FOMO and all that. So I'm not slagging Dumble, and I'm not saying anyone's silly for wanting to try one. And there are an awful lot of good Dumble style amps out there on the market that you can buy without paying $40,000. But remember, Kid Charlemagne and all that stuff was Carlton on a 5E3 with a straight in with the 335. And there is a couple of sounds I got with my 335 and that little 5E3 Uncle Larry there that to me sounded very much like Royal Scam. I mean, it was there. If the right player were here, it would totally be there. And then no one could afford a 5E3 kit. I'm not saying that the Uncle Larry PTP is just a kit. It's not. He's getting his own. It's not just an assembled kit. But there's no magic to making a 5E3. It's just that most people don't know how to anymore, apparently. And Mike over at P2P Amps does. So that's nice. I don't care for the Klon Centaur. I built one. I had to make a change to get it less nasal because its stock form is like this. 50s Les Pauls are fantastic, and there weren't not that many of them were made, not that many of them exist. So I can understand that. That's beyond that's where it deserves to be beyond the thing itself, because I could make a Dumble just like a Dumble. No one can make it, or very few people can make a late 50s Les Paul that's going to sound like a late 50s Les Paul, because that old growth timbre is gone, and that's a big part of it. Gibson certainly doesn't know how to do it anymore, even aside from the wood choices. Hey, JD Associates, can I briefly explain isolated power supplies and how they achieve isolation? Well, basically, they don't share a ground reference. So you have AC coming in, which is grounded, and that is converted to DC. And you have multiple DC outputs, and each DC output is isolated from each other, because it's AC does not have a positive and a negative. AC is literally both directions at once. But it does, the incoming power does have a ground reference. But the DC has a positive and negative waveform. And usually the negative part of the DC is also tied to ground. In an isolated power supply, the negative output of each transformer tap, or however it's being done, is not referenced to ground until it reaches the pedal that it's connected to. So you don't have multiple paths from each pedal to the power supply. You have just the path from your guitar to pedal A, then to pedal B, then to pedal C, then to your amp. And each one of those pedals may be tied to your power supply, but there's no common ground there. So you don't have 3 loops because you have 3 pedals. So that's the brief explanation. Cool, dude. Yeah, the 87X is a good app. It's just, man, that make sure you take care of those the heater balance pot in your 1987X. By the way, I've talked about that a lot. But yeah, they're just, that bright cap kills me. You know, we're not playing Coliseums anymore, so we're, you know, anything other than 7 and above on the volume, that brightness will tear your head off. Hey, Chris Art. So you got a deluxe reverb, loud pop on power off. That shouldn't be happening. You didn't fit a standby. That's fine. There's no need for a standby in that amp. It's very possible you don't have you have a ground connection which is not secure. There should be no pop when you power off a deluxe reverb. There can be a pop when you put an amp in and out of standby on a deluxe reverb, but should not be any pop on power off. You could also have a defective switch. I'd have to see your build. I'm sorry, but again, here's what you do: pull all the preamp tubes except the phase inverter. Power the amp on. Wait till you hear something come out of the speaker. It won't be much. Power the amp off. Does it pop? All right, pull the phase inverter. Repeat the test. Does it pop? All right, pull the output tubes. Repeat the test. Does it pop? You know, you won't hear anything with no power tubes. But if there's a pop, you'll hear the pop, unless it's something wrong in the output tube wiring. So you can isolate the sections. And then, you know, worst comes to worst, you pull the rectifier tube, repeat the process. Do you have a pop with the rectifier tube pulled and all the other tubes out of the amp? It is definitely in your power wiring and your grounds. But beyond that, I can't tell you from here. Yeah, I love the sound of a jumper JTM45 or Jamino for cleans. You know, it's fantastic. And, you know, that's why I've got this AC50 set up right now. Most of the sound is out of the Brilliant channel. I just brought down a little bit of the lows. I'm missing my little hammer on. Anyway, the amp sounds good even if I'm flubbing it. Oops. Yeah. Where was I? Do I have any recommendation for a 500 series chassis? I don't know what you mean by a 500 series. I'm sorry, Scott. See, Scott? Hey, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. Dia Mariv or Diamariv. I'm doing work from an 18-watt TMB Marshall. Wondering what I recommend to upgrade screen grid resistors from 100 ohms for tube longevity. Thank you very much. 1K, 2 watts ought to do you pretty good. That's what I put in almost every AC 15, AC 30, Marshall 18 watt, 1974X, etc. That's makes EL84s a lot happier than 100 ohms. Thank you, Stuck in the Bed. Appreciate that. Very kind of you. Let's see. And thank you, Joe. Let's see. Oh, a lunchbox, an API. Okay. I've not built any of the API kits on the market, so I don't have any to recommend or chassis recommendations, but Wes might. The guy you probably want to talk to is over at the Time Preservation Society, who goes by many names. His name changes from video to video. Some call him Tim. But the Time Preservation Society, that's up his alley, and he probably has reviews of various API kits. Find his channel, watch his videos, shoot him an email. He's a really nice guy. His name's actually Nathan. But I love his videos. I featured them on the channel a while back when I was doing a Channels I Watch kind of thing. He is in that world, and it probably has tried an awful lot of stuff. Hey, dude, I recently added an SLO30 in 1986, 1987X, and we're using a Fryette PS100. Amazing, but warmth dynamics seems to evaporate even if the timbre hasn't changed. Ideas on perfect attenuation. Perfect attenuation is an impossible goal. You can attenuate enough that you don't get kicked off the stage or evicted from your apartment. But the physics of how we hear things mean that if something is lowered enough in volume, it will no longer sound like itself. That's one way of saying it. There's something called the Fletcher-Munson curves. The thing you have to remember is that our hearing is optimized for hearing human speech. So say 800 hertz to 2K, that's our optimal range. We hear that band really well. A telephone, a traditional telephone, doesn't have anything much below about 500 hertz. It doesn't have anything really above 3K. And you still hear everything in a phone call because the stuff that we need to hear is there, and our brain kind of interprets the missing harmonic content from the overtone series. But it means that we hear that frequency range, 800 hertz to 2K, really well. You turn down the volume of your amp, and even if the sound coming out of the amplifier after the attenuation is exactly the same frequency response if you're measuring it with a scope, we're not hearing the high stuff as well. We're not hearing the low stuff as well. We're still hearing the upper mids very efficiently. So it sounds like, hey, man, it's getting a little bit darker and all my low end's going away. That's one of the things that's happening. That's called the Fletcher-Munson curve. That's why old stereos would have a loudness button. Supposedly, so if you listen at low volume, you hit that and have a natural frequency response. Really what we all did back in the day is we turned the stereo up anyway and then hit loudness because then it was even cooler, right? Hear that bass, hear that treble. Some of us outgrew that. Some of us did not. The other thing is loud signals cause our ears to distort a little bit. Doesn't take a lot. And when we hear distorted signals as not just a volume cue, it's a direction cue. It's also there's something in the environment that could be a threat, and our brains wake the hell up. Is that a tiger making that sound? Et cetera, et cetera. Remember, we used to be prey. So our brains find sounds with distortion to be ear candy, brain candy. And so if I record a snare drum, and I perfectly record that snare drum, and a snare drum can be like 110 dB, and I play it back for you at 60 dB, it sounds like nothing. It's like tap, tap, tap. If I play that back at the same level that it actually is in real life, it's like, wow, that's loud, that's so cool, because your ears are compressing and distorting, and we don't hear linearly, but that's another subject. But if I want to put a recording of a snare drum, do a recording of a snare drum such as that it still sounds exciting when you're listening back at a moderate level, which is what we're supposed to listen back to, well, then I, as an engineer, know that I need to add a little bit of harmonic distortion to that sound and add some compression to emulate the way our ears hear things. These are the cues that tell our brain this was a loud source. It's got a compression aspect to it. It's got a little bit of harmonic distortion. And so I'm listening back to that snare at 85 dB because that's as loud as I can listen to my stereo. It sounds exciting. I can picture the drummer really going for it, and it sounds awesome. Whereas if I didn't do all that and I'm listening back, it sounds like... And that's one of the things I've started to do with my videos, and I'll demonstrate. I have a little bit of compression added and a little bit of harmonic interest added on the mic, not to cheat and make it sound like it's a different amp or anything for you guys, but because I know most of you guys are playing this back at low volume. So here is, I'll even turn off the reverb. Here is the Royer on this ET65 with the AC50 without any coloration or compression added. Add a little bit of coloration. A little bit of compression. And then add the limiter, just so we don't get digital nasties. Now, I'm hearing that in the room, so I don't know how much of a dramatic difference that was on this part at this volume level for you guys out there. But I know that I have set all this stuff up because it's the same preset that I use for my produce videos. And I know that what I'm sending out to you guys sounds like what it sounds like in the room, but it's going to sound that way pretty much even if you're listening on your phone at a moderate volume. So you cannot get perfect attenuation from a Fryette or from a reactive load or from an aux box. You can get suitable, adequate, and most of those, the Fryette and the aux box have total colorations. But remember, the real strength for those devices is for you to be able to hear it at a lower level in the room, but to have a clean IR recording of what was actually coming out of the amp. And that's where you have the controls like I was just demonstrating. Now, that's a long-ass answer, and it may just not give you what you need to know, but the other answer is if you have a 100-watt amp and you need it to be the volume of a 20-watt amp, don't use a 100-watt amp, buy a 20-watt amp for those situations, or a 12-watt amp, or a 5-watt amp. Hey, usual things, very good. Yeah, you got to get to know the amp before you know what to change, and the amp itself will settle in a little bit with the speakers, and you got to learn how to use the amp, and they're fantastic choices. And I'm glad that you took my advice. People are always looking to buy shortcuts, and some of the stuff is just sit down, no pick, no effects, clean amp. Can you get a sound out of it? And of course, I miss the freaking hammer tone, the hammer on playing this demonstration of that, because these two fingers suck. These two fingers, man. It's that nerve damage from the wood planer I was telling you guys about, but you can see that missing chunk of my finger there. So do as I say, not as I do. Hey, Brad. But when the real players come over and they pick up my guitars and play through the amps that I've been working on, they sound phenomenal, even if I make flubs. So there are some people who do drive-by comments on my channel telling me how much I suck as a player. And I'm like, yeah, I do. Thanks for noticing that. I'm a better guitarist than Leo Fender was. I'm a better guitarist than Jim Marshall was. And you don't want Steve Vai fixing your amps. Thank you, Jacob. Much appreciated. Looking for Mr. Rhythm and Bites to show up so I can brag on the coffee he sent me. I'll do it even if he doesn't show up, but if he shows up, I'll do it while he's here. Oh, Chris, did I forget to mention you want a Larmar in a AB165 or any Bassman? Pretty much any amp with a push-pull output section. The Larmar is usually the better choice. I think Brad would agree with me. AB763, I think you're talking about. I don't know of an AB765. 64 Bassman, man, Bassmans were changing all over the place there. If you're new to vintage amps, I wouldn't recommend. Well, I can't say I can't recommend. You might get a steal on a phenomenal amp, but the Bassman is a very specific kind of sound. That's kind of an acquired taste for a lot of people. I'd say if you're new to vintage amps or just amps, new to amps in general, get a deluxe reverb reissue or a Princeton reverb reissue. They're really good. They're going to cost you a lot less. They're going to be very flexible. A Bassman of any sort is way too loud for most playing situations these days, unless you add a master volume or bring around an external attenuator, etc. And if you sound good through a deluxe reverb, you'll also sound good with a Bassman. But you're much more likely to be happy out of the gate with a Princeton or a deluxe reverb than you would be with the 64 Bassman that could need an awful lot of work. Hey, Mr. Steve. 3 favorite speakers for a Princeton. Thank you very much, Steve. I really like the WGS ET10 for a smoother sound and the G10C for a small twin sound, a very clean speaker. I also really like pairing kind of character speakers with it. Princeton sounds great with a Alnico. I wouldn't use the little Alnico Gold that Celestia makes. It's crazy expensive, and I don't like the way the mids build up in it. But some of the offerings from like the 10-inch version of the, I think it's G10, sorry, 12A, say 10A 125 from Weber would be a good choice. And there are a lot of good choices. The people out there who love the Little Buddy from Eminence. Eminence has got a lot of good 10-inch speakers. I've not tried the Alessandro 10-inch speaker in Princeton. I bet it'd be a cool thing. Thank you very much, Mr. Clint. I'm glad to be able to give you some good news on that output transformer. Mr. Clint here, in addition to being the world's worst Groucho impersonator, is also the owner of said AC50. So I'm glad to be able to make his sunny day even sunnier. Man, the Eastmans are fantastic guitars. I cannot buy their electric guitars because they have aesthetic choices I don't care for with Ivoroid things and headstock shapes I don't like. But man, I mean, that's just me being aesthetically weird. They are phenomenal guitars. I'm glad you enjoy it. It's probably a much better guitar than that Casino. It's not a very good guitar. It's just a very characterful guitar. Can 2 20-watt amps in parallel, each through a 2x12, get as loud as a single 40 or 50-watt amp with a 4x12? Each through. You'd be hard-pressed to tell whether you're playing through the 2 20-amp, just in terms of the factors you gave. If you're playing through 2 20-watt amps into 2 2x12s versus a 40-watt amp with a 4x12, If they're the same circuit other than that, now they won't be because the output sections are going to have different tube types. But just in terms of those factors, you're going to get, and this, you saying that the speakers, the same speakers with the same efficiency, yeah, they'd be the same volume. In real world, two 20-watt amps is at two 18-watt Marshalls or two deluxe reverbs, because you're going to have a much louder apparent volume from the 18-watt Marshall. But yeah, in terms of the factors, you're moving the same amount of air, and you've just split. Basically, you've taken one of them's mono, one of them's stereo in your question. It's not silly. The really cool thing, though, is to remember that if you have a 20-watt amp with a 1x12 and you plug it into a 4x12, you're about as loud as a 40-watt amp in a 1x12. So if you have a deluxe reverb and it's not loud enough for certain stages, before you buy another amp, you can also buy a 2x12 extension cab to use for those gigs. And then you have three 12-inch speakers moving a lot of air, and your deluxe reverb is a lot louder. Even though you have not increased the wattage, you are increasing the decibels produced on stage because there's more speakers moving more air. That's not a gross simplification, but a simplification, but it is true. Extension cabs, if more people would try them, people would have to own fewer amps. Henry Kaiser bought some of my pedals back in the day, and I talked to him. He was a really nice guy. He sent me his CDs. I listened to them. I did not enjoy them, but not because his music was bad. It was just not to my taste, but I really enjoyed talking to him. And I think if he could take that video off the internet, he would. Man, the 80s were a rough time, but it is an awful lot of crystal lattice and kind of strange, unpleasant sounds. He's better than that humorous video indicates, but he is coming from a Zappa, Sun Ra perspective, which I don't personally. I like certain things to be out, but not quite that harmonically and rhythmically challenging. Wes, that is the single worst pickup line I've ever heard. No, I'd love to license it out and have someone make them and just give me a percentage, etc. But making it myself takes too long. I make too little money from the process. Hey, William Catalano, just get JJs across the board. They sound good. They work well in the amp. They're rugged. Buy them from a good vendor. Don't buy them from the Guitar Center. Don't buy them from Z-Zones. Don't buy them from eBay. Don't buy them from Amazon. Go to the Tube Store. Go to Tube Depot. Go to Eurotubes, Magic Tubes, from someplace that sells tubes. That has a return policy. Just things happen in shipping. JJ ECC 83s and JJ EL 84s, and you'll certainly not break the bank, and the amp will wake the hell up because they're much better tubes than the stock ones. Yeah, I mean, I've accidentally gotten some very Carlton-esque sounds with a Princeton here, just the sounds, not the intricacies, but no, man, it's an open thing. I mean, I've got the mic, and and I get the revenue, but if someone answers a question, you've got an opinion, share it. I mean, I'll tell you if you're wrong, but in this case, you're not. So yeah, I mean, everyone's welcome to. It's a conversation. It's not everyone just sitting on their hands waiting for me to grace them with my freaking presence. My God, that's cool. You're absolutely right. Well, I happen to know that his little Walter amp went to a guy like me who undid a lot of the inside the little Walter amp. It's a shame that he continues to use that thing, which promotes that hack. But Hey, 5 Watt World. Hey, Keith. The real answer is I've got to come up with those diagrams you and I discussed tonight or tomorrow, and I'll submit them to you and make sure that you like them, and then I'll be open to coming on your live stream anytime you wish. I'll even buzz my face because I'm kind of furry at the moment. On that pleasant note, good to see you here, Keith. We're going to go ahead and take the first of two 7-minute intermissions. I'm going to start at this one, 3 minutes early because I need to blow my nose because I'm going to start sounding weird otherwise. So we're going to do our first intermission. I'll see you guys back in a little bit. That's just the normal channel. Everything before was either brilliant or brilliant with a little bit of the normal added in. This is just the normal channel. Still has a little bit more buzz than I'd like. I'm gonna see if I can get the rest of it out. But let's get back to the questions. Sorry, I do so much work on that amp. I want to show off a little bit, you know? Let's see. Hey, Madrigal, thank you very much. This is the FX30, the Sony FX30, and I've got it at the higher native ISO, so 2500, and I've got the Sigma 18 to 50, kind of close to 20 right now, and I've got a little eighth strength black mist filter, just to give a little halation. You could see that in yesterday's video where the video where I showed installing the pot, temporarily installing the pot to do the balance and the phase inverter. The halation around that pot was really nice. In general, though, it just means I don't have a lot of bright reflective highlights in my videos. I have to go back and fight because it just softens all of them. And I've got a big parabolic screen here, light box here, and a 120 watt light, but it's running at 50% power because I don't need it to be real bright. And then I've got a big, what do you call it? Not umbrella, the big balloon style overhead up top. It's at like 5%, just to fill out the room. That's also, when I turn it all the way up, it lights up the bench very evenly, because I've got the light coming from the window, and I've got the light in the background from the outside. And yeah, I definitely have the diffuser on the parabolic. I wanted to try doing some muslin screening in a big arc here, but I don't have the real estate in the room. Sometimes I'll have a white reflector that I'll put up here that fills in this side a little bit more, but with the light coming in the daytime, I don't really need it, I don't think. So I want to be lit without looking like I'm lit. I've tried all this stuff on Amazon and the LED panels, and I always look like I'm auditioning for a beauty channel, and I'm certainly not qualified. So, and that's all streaming HDMI out. So it's capable of streaming 4K, but YouTube, if I stream 4K, does a real long delay between when you ask me a question, when I see it, and when you hear it, because it is a big lag. So I've got it set to ultra low latency, which means I can only do HD for the live streams. All the regular videos are 4K though. Man, I wish more of the people trying to reach me about my extended warranty would bribe me like that. I certainly get those calls all the time. I appreciate you, man. Thank you. Hey, Alan in Berlin, also known as Diego. So you got this 3.14 distortion pedal from some fly-by-night guy. Yeah, that pedal has hard, soft, and a vintage mod switches. What do those switches do? Hard soft is the clipping. So in hard clipping, it's what I use? I think I used the 1 in 48s, whatever. That's just standard Big Muff hard clipping. The soft clipping, however, is using, depending on which version you have and which period, most of them used some germanium germanium diodes for soft clipping, which has much different attack with different overtone series. And then the vintage mod switches let you basically go from like triangle to ram. Basically, I wanted to make one pedal that did all those Gilmore sounds from pretty much from metal through the wall. So I want to see if I can get one pedal that would do the Big Muff sounds and also do the fuzz face sounds, though it doesn't do the volume tricks that fuzz faces do. But sound good every day, not just alternate Tuesdays, because the old Big Muffs back in the, you have to buy 5, This one sounds good today, but the humidity is going to change tomorrow, so we'll have to go to the other one. I just want it to be consistent. But basically, you push the button, you fiddle the knobs, you see if you like the sound. It's very flexible, but you know, there's not a wrong setting. It's just going to be depending on the sound you want to get. Thank you for supporting that fly-by-night guy. Do you have one of the ones that's more larger, rounded box, like a 1590, or do you have the smaller, more compact one, about the size of like of a Phase 90? Hey, Sun Tzu, update on last week's question. Lawnmower affecting balance of tremolo. I think the balance is being affected by the volumes of each channel is normal. I didn't realize. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. The channels are interactive, but sorry. And there's a second part. The tremolo signal appears in the other gain stage in the amp because of the way the tremolo causes power to draw from the amp. I believe to turn the volumes up on my amp would cause that signal to amplify and constructively interfere with the natural tremolo signal from the outside and push the power tube so far and to cut off one pair is off. I don't think that's happening, Sun Tzu. You may have a problem in your amp, but I'd have to see it and hear it to give you more advice. It's hard to do remotely. Sorry. If it bothers you, take it to a tech. Usually the tremolos in those things are rock solid. Hey, Alan, okay, 5769000001, not a DOD style box. I'm trying to remember how I did the serial number on that. So it's one of the larger ones. Yeah, electronically, I think the later ones are better. The later ones, the smaller ones, have a buffered signal, so buffered bypass. You've got one of the earlier true bypass ones. It's still a great sounding pedal, but I got even better on the later versions. I wish I still had one of those. I've got the box to make one. I just haven't found the time. I just don't use pedals very often anymore. And then if I made one, people would want to buy one, and I don't want to go down that path again. Unless people will pay me $1 million. Let's see. Just a friendly reminder to everyone, if you put the question mark before your questions, I do see them more easily, but I do look for them. How to have a 2007 Deluxe Reverb have a clicking sound with the foot switch plugged in and reverb stops working. Reverb works fine without the foot switch. Tells me that you probably have a problem in the wiring of your foot switch, Sergio, or the cable, and it's maybe intermittently making contact and breaking contact. The way to test that is to get a guitar cable or any. Wait a second. I'm trying to remember on your 2007 Deluxe Reverb. So that'd be the reissue. Yeah, get a guitar cable and plug it in, and then pull it back one. That's got a tip, a ring, and a sleeve. And the tip is for tremolo. All the way insert is tremolo. Pull it out one, you're going to be on the reverb connection, and touch the other end, the tip of the other end of the cable. The tip, just a chassis there, like or the sleeve of the jack, and that'll ground it out the way the foot switch is supposed to do. And if it's turning off and turning on and turning off and turning on when you touch it, then the circuit in the amp is fine. You've got a problem with your foot switch or the cable of your foot switch. In which case, don't buy a replacement Fender one because they're really expensive and really junk, and they often fail because the insulation on that wire that they use is crap. If you go to, I think it's guitarpartsresource.com, he sells some aftermarket ones which are better built and they're cheaper and they do the job exactly the same way. Yes, and we're back to the kinks. Always back to the kinks. God bless Strawberry Jam. And all the other varieties. And Donald Duck. Absolutely, Joe. I have seen their videos. I've not watched one. I'm I'll have to try something. Thank you for that, Matt. And Sun Tzu, I don't mean to just blow you off, but I don't know. I don't know the answer from here. It's something, if you brought the amp over, we could solve probably 15 minutes, or at least find what the solution would be. But certain things I cannot do remotely. But that doesn't make your hypothesis. No offense, does not make sense to me. That's not how this thing kind of works. It's more likely that the bias is being affected by the tremolo circuit in a bad way, and something's acting up. But I don't have time to get into the diagnostic. I don't have time today to go through the schematic and point to various possible things it could be. But I will look at the schematic in the next day or two, and if something comes to mind, shoot me an email, info@sonicaudio.com, and if your username is not Sun Tzu, say, hey, this is Sun Tzu or whatever, and say AC, Vox bias problem, and I'll try to get back to you. I mean, you're here all the time. You come to a lot of the chats. I want to take care of you if I can. I don't have a magic bullet for you right now. Hey, Mullet the Guitar Guru. Blown speaker cause tubes to make noise while tapping. Even the phase tube. Music Man 115. Well, if you damage your output tubes severely with a bad speaker and no load, it's possible, but I imagine you just have microphonic tubes. I don't think the microphonics were necessarily caused by the blown speaker. It could just be coincidental. It's possible, but either way, if they're that microphonic that you can hear them, change them out. Hey, U.S. New York, or use New York. I'm not sure how they say New York City there. Dr. Maz 18 non-reverb Mark II tested bad cathode bypass resistor and cap, then more bad Mallory 150s in V1 and V2. Best replacement caps resistors and practices for his Dr. Z amps from East Harlem. All right. Upper East Side, New York City. Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you for joining us from East Harlem. That's odd that you have bad 150Ms, and 150Ms rarely go bad. If I get a Dr. Z in, I usually put in 150Ms because that's what he used originally. Another good choice would be the Vishay MKT 1813s, which is my cap of preference usually. It's possible maybe the caps, the Mallory's that went bad for you were 400 volt rated, and change them out for 630 volt if that's your option. Resistors, he's using 1 watt carbon films, so half watt or 1 watt carbon film. It depends on where you get them. If you're going to Mauser or DigiKey, I'll give you certain brands. Or you can just go to, probably for most people, the easier way to do it for most users, go to Tube Depot. They've got all that stuff under their DIY section. And you can buy 150Ms, 630 volt rated. You can buy 1 watt carbon films. They've got a huge stash of Zycons when they were still being made. They're really good quality. Pretty much exactly what's in the Dr. Z. But I've never had a 150 go bad in a Dr. Z, but it's possible you just had there was a severe overvoltage, or that you use 400 volts and 630 volts is the ticket. That's tubedepot.com. Thanks, Working Player. Well, I used to be a good guitarist, and I hang around really good guitarists, and so I know what I am. I don't have to be a good guitarist to do what I do. I have to know what a good guitarist needs, and to be able to communicate with good guitarists, many of whom don't understand the technical aspects of things, so I have to translate. I think that's a more important role for me to play, honestly, than to be yet another good guitarist, going nowhere. You know, this it's not exactly, hey, let's start a band. We can put on the show right here. You know, no. If I were to do a band, it'd be like another dad band. Okay, great. We don't need another dad rock band. I enjoy playing, but the real enjoyment for me is when a real player takes what I do and sails off into the sunset with it. That's the goal. Hey, Lovecrafty. Well, thank you very much. Well, part of it is that I knew that the owner wanted it fixed and that he could afford to have it fixed and that it was worthwhile to have it and that the amp was worth fixing. It's not like I spent all that time on an old custom or something or PV Bandit. You know, it is an awful lot of work, and he knew that before I started because the chassis was in bad shape, and I had to rebuild the amp to a large degree. But there aren't that many of them out there. There are even fewer of them in North America. And as you can hear, it's cool. It sounds really good. He's going to have something relatively unique. For many owners, I would have advised against getting that amp or having that extensive amount of work done. But occasionally, it's worthwhile. So when the amp and the client and the tech all align, it can be worthwhile doing. You know, it's not like it's a JCM 900 and it's all in bad shape. Well, screw that, buy a different JCM 900. This is more like a Marshall Black Flag. You know, there are only 60 of them, you know, and this one needs a lot of work, but at the end of it, it'll be a Marshall Black Flag. You know, and it's, you know, it is the Shipathesis argument. But hey, I never use J hooks. I desolder the old component and unwrap the old component. It's a pain in the butt on Dr. Z's. You know, get in there. Hope you have good desoldering tool or good solder sucker or good braid. And then I wrap the new lead around the turret, but I don't do a 360-degree wrap. I do a 270-degree wrap, which is true mil spec. But I don't do J hooks. If you mean J hooking the new lead to the old lead. But yeah, as far as the 270-degree, you're on board. Anything else that changed while under the hood? The non-reverb Maz 18s are really good. Make sure the input jacks, the pots, and the output jacks are tight because they use very thick plastic panels on Dr. Z's. They can't use tooth washers because the bushings of the pots and the jacks aren't long enough typically. Now, they might have some that are because they might have used some Switchcraft longer bushing jacks. But in general, Dr. Z's don't have any lock washers. Make sure all the hardware is tight. Just over time, make sure that any screws going to the chassis that hold on transformers are tight. Screws used for ground are tight, and everything's clean. If it looks good, it is good. And if you have to do a bunch of desoldering on the board, go to Walgreens, get some 91% isopropyl and some Q-tips and get all that old stuff off the board because that stuff eventually, the old crusties can build up and attract dirt and cause conductivity issues. Hey, Matt. I was 20 or 21 years old. I was taking a sculpture class in college. And for my piece, I needed to run a piece of wood through a planer. And so they had the wood planer machine set up, and it had safety rails and safety guards and a tool that you use to push the piece through. And I was doing all that. What happened was that there was a knot in the wood hidden beneath the surface, or a nail. I don't remember specifics, but the wood was being fed into the wood planer like this, and it hit something inside and it ejected that wood that way, which hit a vertical metal pipe that was about 4 feet behind where I was standing, and then it bounced off that pipe and came back and hit my left hand. It pushed my left hand through the plastic guard into the wood planer. It was just fucking bad luck that wood shot out at the right angle to hit that one pipe in the middle of the room and came back and hit my left hand, and didn't hit my left hand this way, didn't hit my left hand that way, hit my left hand right into the wood planer. I don't recommend it. Well, I do, at least the Marshalls I've seen, use a two-phase rectifier with center tap to ground for the 50 watt amps, but a bridge rectifier without center tap for the 100 watt amps. Hey, Mr. Puck. It's a matter of current, weight, and size for the most part. By using the non-center tap with the full bridge, they're able to get the specs that they need using a smaller transformer, and it's already a pretty big transformer. They also wanted to have more filtering on the larger amps, and that's an easy way to deal with that. If you look at what they're actually doing, it's kind of almost a voltage doubler. It's not quite. I'd have to have everything in front of me right now to be exactly sure what I want to say, because that's something I looked at a long time ago and figured out, and now I have a dim memory of some of the whys. But it's not necessary to use a non-center tapped output transformer for the 50 watts, because what was available when those amps were designed, 50 watt transformers were very common. The early ones were the same ones they used for the JTM45s. They just didn't connect the rectifier taps. But given that the transformers that were on the market from their suppliers in 1966, when they started getting to the 100 watts, they didn't have a comparable comparable transformer to the 50 watt, just much larger, but they did have one that was bigger without a center tap, which let them get where they needed to go. If I had to replace the baffle in a Super Reverb, what material and thickness would I recommend? Well, I just went through this with Jeff there, and because the current stuff on the market, sorry, not Jeff, Greg, sorry, Greg Hopkins, because he did the replacement baffle for that Bassman. The old lumber and the new lumber are very different in their dimensions. So I think Fender probably used 3/16 inch. So I would, if Brad's still here, ask Brad. If Greg's still here, ask Greg, because they do the woodworking much more than I do. Typically, for a client, I would call Mojotone and get an order replacement baffle for Super Reverb, because they fit, and they use good quality birch plywood with the frame and everything. But I've not measured their Super Reverb baffle to know, and I don't have a wood shop, and I don't want a wood shop. So I would refer you to Brad and to Greg, who actually do these kinds of things. You definitely want it to be thick enough to handle the weight of the transformers. And you don't want something with a bunch of voids in it, because then the front screws will likely pull out. And I'm not a big fan of pine for baffles. You don't want to have a baffle be resonant. Hey, Steve, I thought I mentioned the G10. Oh, the CS. I don't much care for the S variant. I find it a little too smooth. I like the air that the non-S version has, but other people love the G10SC, G10CS. It's a good speaker. It's just not my preference. I like a little more air in my Fenders. If that sounds weird, if that makes sense to you, I find, here Brad says, I'm about to start a video series that answers your exact questions, Craig. Same amp and all, stay posted. Of course, he'll give you freaking metric measurements. We'll have to translate into real dimensions, right? But, hey, Jorge. Clean volume pots of different guitars create a friction noise when turned through a 5F1 build. DC in the pots. Friction sound not heard through any other amps. Knobs not touching pickguard. Imagine what you're hearing is DC on the input of the amp. So let's see here. We got the AC50 bridge pickup. A little bit of there just because I need to clean that pot a bit. But no DC glitch. You've got DC on your inputs, your 5F1. If you have the 68K mixer resistors off the inputs installed on your board, that's probably where they're coming from, because the board on a 5F1, if it has the resistors there, it's really close to your B plus node and it leaks through there. Remove them from the board, remove the wires from the pots to the board, and then from there to the input jacks. And just do the 68Ks on the input jacks the way they did on the later 60s versions of the amp, and just run a wire from there to it'll all go away. Make sure you have good solder joints on your jacks, and the 1 meg is good. But that's what you got. DC on the input of the input jacks, either coming. It could be coming from the grid of your tube. So before you do anything, change V1 and make sure it's just not a leaky grid there. But usually in a tweed Fender style, it's voltage being leaked into the input from the B plus node, which is right next to them. There's a reason Fender stopped putting the input resistors on the board in a little V next to the B plus node and started putting them on the input jacks. And you've just discovered it. Hey Sash, back when my PV5150 was in working order, I used to run it with only 2 6L6 power tubes, and I liked how it sounded reactive. Please explain what exactly is happening in the circumstance. Well, if you did an intentional mismatch and say ran it set it to 16, gave an 8 ohm load, whatever, then the difference would just be that the tubes had higher plate voltage and your bias was probably hotter, and the PV5150 has an ice cold bias in stock form, so you probably ended up at a more normal bias by doing that. If you did not do the impedance mismatch, then you would be running with an incorrect load, which won't hurt anything, but it changes the compression and efficiency of the output tubes and gives you a different sound. And it's one of those sounds that's hard to describe, but fairly easy to hear. As long as you're only off by a factor of 1, which you would be, so you'd be like 8 to 16 or 8 to 4, not 4 to 16. So you're still in the safe operating space. As long as the B plus did not get too high for the screens, which it probably would not with a pair of 6L6s, and as long as the bias didn't exceed, let's say, 80% dissipation, which it very unlikely to in a 5150, it probably went from 17% to 35%. So you probably just got a better bias swing on your output tubes and a little bit more compression, and probably lost 6, 9 dB of potential volume, maybe just 6 dB. The real danger is someone will read an interview with Eddie Van Halen and they'll pull 1 tube or 3 tubes out of their Marshall 100 watt, chasing the brown sound, and they just damage their amp. Let's see. Let's see. Hey, David. Quick question. I'm building a guitar pedal. I'm having a hard time finding those dual pots for the gain. I use a DigiKey, but I got the wrong one. I'm just using a standard enclosure. Well, I don't know what value or taper you need, or if it's concentric or just dual gang. But Small Bear Electronics has an awful lot of stuff necessary for pedal building, and a lot of dual gang pots. Check there, because it's much easier to sort through their stuff than it is to wade through DigiKey or, oh, it's for a Klon, okay. I'm sure that you can get that pot for a Klon at Small Bear Electronics. They used to be smallbear.com, and now it's a stupid URL, but you Google it, we'll turn it up. Because they stock stuff especially for that kind of stuff. If they don't have it, Aeon Effects might. AION, I think. They also sell kits, and they have a Klon kit, so they'll probably have that pot for sale. All right, Sun Zoom, looking at this. The reason I say this is because the issue disappears, and as I turn down the lawnmower master volume, it gets worse as I turn up the top boost volume and bass control. Well, I'm not sure what to tell you. I mean, you're gonna notice problems less if the output is lower. You're gonna notice them more if the incoming signal to the output is louder. I don't know that you have a cause and effect there so much as it's easier and harder to hear the symptom as you change those variables. I'm not saying that your amp isn't messed up, because your amp probably does have a problem. It's not a very common problem with that series, which is good, and it's probably pretty easy to fix, but I'd have to have a better idea than I can tell you over here. Hey, David Kim, you just got a TB6 for a good price. Any suggestions for highest priority mods and tubes? What do I think of 12x7 alternatives? I don't worry about the tubes yet. Worry about the amp being a noisy piece of shit as it's built. I've got tons of videos on the AC30 TB and TBX6, the Korg era, and there are some serious ground loops in those amps, and the preamp tube sockets are made of cheese. You know, so many things to deal with before you don't even worry about modding. It's just basic circuit correction that those things need. And then for 12x7 alternatives, it's a Vox. It's got plenty of high end. JJs are good choices. Send me a video, Sanzuya. Lawnmower shunt the preamp tremolo to ground, and the tremolo stabilizes. All right. Well, I think we have two different things being conflated there. But yeah, send me a video, and I'll look at the schematic and refamiliarize myself with all the variables, and reach out to you. See, that's why you don't want no damn batteries in your Stratocaster. Stratocaster, you got to take no batteries. This is the same guy who's talking about how much he wishes he had some EMGs last week. But, you know, yeah. If your guitar takes a battery and it's acting up, we'll get to the bottom of this, Sunzu. We'll figure this out. Shoot me your phone number, too, because this stuff is much easier in real time. Assuming you're in the States, or we can do a WhatsApp or whatever. I don't think either of us need to have a huge bill, but there are workarounds these days. Hey, Neon. Thank you very much. Most 90s Ampegs are pretty simple to work on. Typically, the board, they've got quick connects to disconnect a whole bunch of stuff, and the board is held in place by a bunch of screws, one of which is the main ground. Sometimes they'll have more than one. It's built by crate, so sometimes the Ampegs do the same trick they did with the crates, where the grounds are made to chassis by two wires, jumper wires on the board that are just mashed down by a screw going into a standoff. Those often break, but you can disconnect that stuff. Be careful of the knobs and the pot shafts, because they have some non-standard pot shafts usually. If those break, it's hard to get replacements. But then the whole thing lifts up, and recapping them is usually pretty easy. As far as tips on soldering PCBs, you need a temperature-controlled station, or don't even try. Don't try with a handheld. You want to work at about 700 to 750 degrees. That's Fahrenheit, so convert to Celsius as necessary. Old solder on the board won't flow until you add new solder. A 90s Ampeg probably used leaded solder, so it's pretty easy to work on. And so you either add a little bit of flux or just add the flux from some fresh solder. Add some fresh solder. The old stuff will reflow. It'll come up with a braid or a solder sucker pretty easily. If you add flux, you're going to have to do a lot of cleanup afterwards, but it's doable. And then one of the tricks, if you have a resistor that's going through the board, like here are the two leads, and here my hand's the body of the resistor. These are two leads, and they're going through the board like that, and then they're bent over. So I'm just going to say that my hand is the board, and this finger is the lead that is bent over. Don't remove the solder, then try to pull that up through, because that bend will just tear up that trace in that pad. What you do is right where the wire joins the body of the resistor, snip that wire, and then you push that wire down from the top, and then that J-hook part is down here, and then you just pull that out, and that way you're not damaging those traces. And that's what you have to do with a lot of PCBs out there, but especially the Ampegs and crates and the Fenders, because otherwise it'll just rip all your traces and pads to shreds. I'm not sure if this made any sense to anyone. This is a worse pickup line than Wes's. I couldn't tell you, Richard. I've got the big Vox book in there, and it's this thick, so I could tell you, I guess, but I'm not going to, because it would take me too long to find it. Someone knows, but I don't. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate you. To take advantage of new old stock tubes, why not use a tube with dissimilar triodes and the phase inverter of Princeton reverb? You need half of it at 12x7 for the tremolo, but the PI side is unity gain, so 12AU7 should be fine. Flaw in my logic? Well, no. If you like the sound, that's absolutely fine. The trick is to find the tube where the triodes match up, like a 12DW7, where the triodes match up to where they are in the amp. So if there is such a tube where the 12AU side is the pins 6 through 8, then go for it. I don't recall off the top of my head which the pinout works at. That tube is one that would work, but you'd have to have the pins correlate. You don't want to have the AU for the tremolo side, or you'd have some weak ass trim. But yeah, it totally works fine if the stars align. Hey, CJ, glad to help. Yeah, electric toothbrushes are fantastic because there's only so fast we can vibrate things, and we're back to Wes's pickup line. But, free vibrators. You don't think the rest of you were wondering what kind of channel you're watching, but it works. Just take the electric toothbrush, turn it on, and use the handle of it, not the brush side, and just touch things in the circuit. You will find loose solder joints. You'll find things that are microphonic because, they happen as we play the amp. We hear the noise, but, even a low A, that's 440 hertz. That's 440 taps per second. I can't tap something that fast. Can you? No. Neil Peart couldn't have tapped it that fast. But an electric toothbrush handle can tap it really freaking fast. Well, not to guide a big piece of wood, I was using a plastic thing with a handle on this hand and another one on this hand, and I was not putting this hand in. I was just guiding it in. This left hand, once it was on the track, I was going to let go and just keep. I was doing it right. Just the stars aligned to F me up. And so much for my rock star career. That plus the metabolism, Hey, Sort of Montana. I believe they're the same amp. I think they're the same amp. Aside from the speakers, the real answer is if you can find one where you have those old blue Jensen Alnicos, Those are the best sounding 10-inch Alnicos for a Bassman or Super Reverb made since CTS stopped making them. But I think they're the same circuit otherwise. Hey, Bottom Kitchen, suppose a transformer is healthy, but the wires are now too short from years of maintenance. Can those wires be replaced, or would a whole new transformer be necessary? It depends on the transformer. Some transformers have little, if you take the covers off, there are little terminals where the wires from the transformer winding itself go to the terminal, and then new lead wires are soldered there that come out through a hole, an opening in the cover. Others, what you have to work with are the winds, or the splices are buried under wraps. So sometimes you can reconnect something inside the transformer. Sometimes your best bet is to do a splice. What I have often done in the past is I'll take the bottom, it's like a deluxe reverb. I'll take the bottom bell cover off. Remove the transformer, take the bell cover off. And very carefully, because you don't get too many shots of this, do the splice in such a way that the splice can stay inside the transformer once you put the bell end cover on, and only the new wire comes out. It looks good, so no one's seeing a bunch of splices. B, the splices, being somewhat mechanically less, they're not as reliable, are all still in the transformer. There's not going to be tugging on them. They're not going to be subject to failure. But to do that, you may have to only have like 1.5 inches of wire inside the transformer, which means you cannot take 6 tries to get that splice. You got to get it in one. Does that make sense? Some of us use feet. It might be a decimal point somewhere, but we use feet. Wes beat me to the joke. I was feeling proud of myself for thinking of that. All right, now you're beating a dead horse there, Wes. Hey, see, Scott just picked up a 90s Tweed PV Classic 50, new tube with JJ's. Still too mid-muddy. Speaker in it has no markings. Would replacing the speaker clean up the mud in the mids? I don't know, but the speaker probably sucks. So before you buy anything, try the amp into a different speaker. However you have to do that. There's a 1/4-inch jack on the amp. You should be able to run out to an external cab or someone else's deluxe reverb or whatever. See what you think. Yeah, it may be that you just don't like the Classic 20, or maybe that your Classic 20 is effed up, but the speaker often was not great in those. All right, Greg's got one of the best answers here. Should be half-inch quality ply, void free birch if you find it, with a 1/4-inch by 1-inch strip around the face to hold the grill cloth off the face. 3/8 plus 3/8 strips would be okay. Yeah, Greg knows what he does. He's talking about, he makes custom cabs for Magnatone, as well as having graced us with that baffle for that 59 Bassman. And Brad also knows what he's talking about, but he's going to be giving you metric measurements when he puts out that video. They're probably agreeing with each other, just using different measurement systems. Hey, Pearson. Greetings from Kansas City. Well, greetings from Memphis. We have better barbecue. Watched a million of my vids. Now I'm petrified to anything currently in production. Sorry, man. Are there any hand-wired, low-watt 6v6 amps a guy can buy once and be done? Yeah, absolutely. Right there, I got one. I'll hook it up for you. This is the Uncle Larry 5E3. If you want a Tweed Deluxe with 6v6s, it is fantastic. It's hand-wired, built really well, sounds great. He also makes a Princeton kit, which, while he's using the board layout from the Hoffman build, he's building it, it's not a kit build per se. and it looks like a really good bang for the buck choice. Give me just 1 second. I'll hook up the 5E3. One of the nice things about this Royer, besides the fact that it sells and it sounds fantastic, is it's real forgiving as to placement. So if I'm anywhere in the general vicinity where I want to be, it's going to sound right. It's in its own way as cool as that AC50. It's a lot less loud, and it has no hum. So, you know. Those are the hand-wired low-watt 6v6 amps I would recommend to people. He might make a deluxe reverb version as well. There you go, Sash. Yeah, you just gave it you had a little higher B+, and you had a more sane bias because the stock bias on 5150 is ice fucking cold. Let's see. Gotcha, Sunzu. A little bit after the stream ends, I'll reach out to you. Afterwards, I always have to like change my headspace for a little bit, but then I'll get back to you. Hey, Plump Weasel. What's my opinion on the differences between EL34 and 6L6 powered amps? Internet comments seem to favor 6L6 for metal and EL34 for rock. Silly me, I thought metal was a form of rock. Way too much is made of this stuff on the internet. A lot of Marshalls that were designed for EL34s shipped for decades with 5881s, which were really rebadged 6L6s, and people describe them as having that classic Marshall sound. Even though they're using 6L6s, they're just skinny 6L6s. You know, I've done the same amp with 6L6s, EL34s, and 6550s, and they can be made to sound pretty much the same. Can be made to. They have different bias conditions. They have different plate voltages. They have different preferences and output transformer impedances. As far as your question goes, because you're not going to be sticking 34s in a 5150 or 6L6s in a Marshall 1959. The 6L6, you can have a tighter low end and a more prominent low end. So for the guys doing metal, where they're doing a lot of really clean right-hand muted, it sounds like a drill hammer, 6L6 is going to have a much faster transient for that and a tighter low end for that. So for that style of music, that can be very effective. And also for those doing the drop C gent stuff, and baritone and all that, with resonance controls, there's a lot more low-end response to 6L6. So if you want to have that modern low-end of doom kind of sound, 6L6 gives you more of that. But Metallica did an awful lot of years with 34s, and they, by all accounts, they have a pretty good metal sound. Tool, Adam Jones of Tool, primarily uses old Marshall, slightly modded bass amps, super bass. Definitely 6550s or EL34s. I'm not sure what he's running in them. Neither one of which sounds like a 606. Tool sounds awesome. But he's also staying out of the. He is very much not going in the lowest range. He's leaving that to Justin and to Danny Carey's right foot because he's very smart. It's almost like the distinction the internet likes to make between American speakers and British speakers. I'm like, shit, man, I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. Any damn speaker I use is going to be American. It's going to sound American. You know. How decent is the Evil Twin amps or 90s? They're horrible. They're not decent in the slightest. Avoid the Evil Twins and the 94 Twin. They're garbage amps. There's a reason Fender came out with the 65 reissue twin reverb, and it was like, oh, they're back. Uncle Larry, yeah, Uncle Larry is one of the nicknames of Tom Bukovac. Robert D. I was going direct into the Uncle Larry. I almost never use pedals on the live stream or my demos. I've got some plate reverb added to the mic, which because I have it set up and it sounds good on the AC50 as well, which also doesn't have reverb. But most people aren't used to hearing a dry guitar sound. So if I can give just a little bit of reverb, give you a sense of what it might sound like to you. With most people's rigs, they have reverb pedals and stuff. Hey, Andy Feldman. What are my thoughts on the UK-built 60th anniversary box AC50 and AC30? They are quite expensive. I'm trying to remember which one that is. I've had some anniversary models in. If that's the one that has reverb, then it can be made to be good, but in stock form it was awful. In stock form it did not have any balls to it, and the tone was just sucked out of it because the way they inserted the reverb, too much insertion loss on the channel. But I think they have another, a different anniversary. This time we got it right. That's bringing back all the features of the original AC36 with 3 channels. I've not had one of those in, so I can't speak to that one. But if it's the one with reverb, avoid, or only get if you get a good, decent, really good discount, because they're going to need a lot of work to be made as good as, even at a starting point, as good as the straight off the rack AC30 Custom. All right, we are actually caught up to questions, and I need to go drain my millimeters. So I'm going to take the second intermission now, and see you guys back in 7 minutes. In the review videos on the Uncle Larry 583, I feel I did it a disservice by just showing some higher gain stuff. But I also knew that Tom probably has videos of this or him playing it, and people own it and put video. You can hear the amp played more fully, but you know, just for fun. So they're much more versatile amps than you might have thought if you'd only ever heard of 583 through those last two videos I did. One of the reasons I linked at the end of that video to an old video I did back with an old Galaxy phone and just a basic SM57 run into a Line 6 preamp of all things. This is what I had at the time, of Logan playing a 58 that I restored. And you get a much more bigger sense of the versatility the amp offers. Same for the Casino. The Casino is associated with the Beatles. It does a lot more than that. It's a very nice guitar. That's it. Go. But it is hollow, and it will take off, which is part of the fun. Hey, Cat's Music Journey. Is the Creamback considered a loudspeaker? Played one many times through that one unit I have, and they all seem louder. It's not the most efficient by specs, but it feels loud. Well, it's a very efficient speaker. It's not the most efficient speaker on the market, but it's up there, I think 99. But it is sensitive at certain frequencies that other speakers aren't as sensitive at, or rather, certain frequencies with the Creamback are more prominent, whereas the same frequencies may be a little bit scooped in other amps, sorry, other speakers. So for the style of what you play through the amp that you have and the resonance of the cabinet and the volume of the cabinet that you have, you may get more usable perceived volume from that, even though a different, more efficient speaker may seem less loud. But, you know, there's more to it than just the weighted dB rating. Hey, 74 Canal. Working on a 76 Pro Reverb Silverface CBS Era. Can't find why I get an awful distortion past 5 on the volume. Whatever position the master volume is, bias is okay, caps new. Check your grounds. Always check your grounds, as you found that I made that mistake on that AC50 in yesterday's video. Maybe that your tone stack is disconnected. Is it on both channels? I would have to see your amp beyond that to know. And I don't know whether you have, so you have new caps. Are all your electrolytic caps new? You could also have a bad resistor somewhere in there. There could be an awful lot that could be, but the grounds are fundamental. I always, when I'm testing a reverb, when I'm testing a Fender with reverb, I always start with just a normal channel, because then I can just have V1 and V6 in place and all the other tubes pulled. And if I know that so there's only like 4 or 5 components in the normal channel to deal with. I guess you have to have V2 and V3. Or V1 and V2 present, but you have fewer tubes to account for, fewer components. Get the normal channel working right. I was thinking of the AC30, sorry, to be honest. But get the normal channel working right. And once you have that working in the output section, than bring in the reverb channel because it's more complicated. Yeah, I used to love playing, even with my limitations. But to be honest, it's part of punching in the clock to work now. So it's one of the reasons I've taken up photography as my my creative outlet. It's not associated with any financial responsibilities or anything. Also, you know, and I'm not complaining. I'm very lucky to be in the position I'm in. But it is quite something to wake up and open up your phone and go to the internet and have a whole bunch of people, strangers, tell you how much you suck. Okay. I could sell popcorn during the intermission. It's just the delivery fee would be insane. All right, there you go, 74 Canal. Your vibrato channel only is playing up. Normal channel is fine. I'll tell you what to check. Well, you say all electrolytic caps are new. The reverb channel, the V4 cathode, if that cap is not good, you will have insane overdrive and nasty sounds because they're blending the wet and the dry in such a way that you'll have terrible feedback if that cap is not good. So make sure that's a good cap there and make sure all your cathode resistors actually measure right. Wes Chilton says that's why I never post my playing on the internet on any instrument. Wes is lying to you, by the way. Wes went to Berkeley. Wes is a badass. He still plays, as far as I know, at a high level. He just likes to pretend he's a schlub like me. I think he makes it think we find him more relatable that way. Total wanker. Hey, Lewis. So you got a Lewis Electric Gatone. I've never played the Gatone. I've had some Lewis Electrics and they've all been part of this amp, either part of this amp matched with part of this other amp in such a way that doesn't quite work, or just a straight up Fender clone with paint on things, so you don't know that it's a Mallory 150 and a Vishay Dale RN series, and the values are exactly the Fender values that he paints with the red to make it seem like he's doing something special. I've had numerous of them with unsoldered wires and connections everywhere. I've had circuits that come in that just would never have worked as implemented, and had a client who had one, sent it back to Lewis several times because he could not play certain notes, and Lewis just said, just don't play an F sharp, because the amp rang out horribly on an F sharp. Had a bad choke. It was very fast to diagnose he had a bad choke. Had pinhole burns in the choke. You could see them. So I don't have a high opinion of that company. But if yours sounds great and works, fantastic. You won a lottery. Well, you know, it's easy to armchair quarterback anything. And the thing is, I never pretend to be a badass player. I just happen to know a lot of badass players, and they tend to like what I do. Did that in the wrong key. Yeah, there's a lot to be said for overdrive pedals, and there's something to be said for not using any too. This is not that loud. This is much less loud than that AC50. when I started the stream with the AC50 turned up to like 7, I could only take so much in the room. I tried putting the headphones on, but they're not sealed, and it just messed with my sense of space, but didn't really give me much protection. I try not to subject myself to too much loud at a time. There's a reason I love a dummy load, and there's a reason I want to get an aux box or similar for testing the big beasts that come in from time to time without going deaf. So I'll do 5 to 10 minutes at higher volume. I give myself a rest. I have to, every amp that comes in, I've got to do the stereotypical everything all the way up, just to make sure there's no oscillation and stuff. I don't have to play it like that though. Just need to make sure that it's going to work at a high volume. Do I think Uncle Larry is worth $2,600 plus? Yeah, absolutely. It's hand built by one guy in the United States who knows what he's doing, who has has to pay for health insurance, has to pay for lighting, has to pay for utilities. He's not competing with child labor in Malaysia. He's not competing with Chinese factory prices. And he does it because he likes doing it. He doesn't have to build them. He has a different job. So you're lucky to be able to get one, because there's a world of people out there on eBay selling kit build 5E3s where they don't know what they're doing. And so you buy one for $700 and throw your money away. Buy one for $1,100, bring it to a guy like me, pay another $400 to make it passable. Or you can go to P2P amps or to me and have us build one from scratch, and it's going to be around $2,600. Fender could make that amp for $1,000, really high quality. They don't, either because they don't care to or because they've lost the plot. Your choice. But, I think it is a very fair price. It's certainly less than a vintage one, and you could do an entire record with it. I mean, not for death metal, but almost any other genre, from country to jazz, you can do an entire record with a 5E3 and a Telecaster. So. Thank you, Mr. Plump. Or is that Mr. Weasel? Appreciate you. It's very kind of you. Do I think it sounds close enough to the vintage ones? Yeah. In fact, in some ways, it sounds better than the vintage ones, Wes, because it doesn't have as much low-end mud that the 5E3 has from default. It's another thing I fix in those. In mine, I clean up the cathodione phase inverter a bit more. But, this is certainly very accurate representation. The real difference is that this amp right now, what you've been hearing, has got a Celestian Gold, which is not going to sound like the vintage ones. I think the closest thing on the market today to what the old Jensens sound like, you'd have to get a Weber 12A 125 and play the hell out of it to get it to wear in. Or cheat and get one with a little bit more doping, and then wait. It still needs to break in, but it's not going to be as bright. I will tell you a secret. The reason that amp is still here is currently Uncle Larry amps P2P is not shipping with the Celestian Gold. They are shipping with this Celestian G1265, which is a very different and, in my opinion, better sounding speaker for this. And this amp is actually getting a Creamback 65, which is a similar sound, but a little more high end, very close to the ET65. So if you were to put this old, if you had a 58 5E3 and it had the old Jensen that still worked, and you played this amp through that old speaker, it would sound like a slightly less flubby version of the original. Now you can have 3 originals next to each other. They're going, depending on their condition, they'll sound different. That is an authentic sound. People think it's not authentic because it's not noisy. The old ones aren't noisy if they're maintained. Most people don't maintain their old amps, or they expect vintage to equal noise, and it's not. I'm going to get this AC50 even quieter still, though the noise level is so far below the level of the playing that when you set the mic pre-level, you hear what you've been hearing in this stream. You hear the guitar, And maybe somewhere way in the distance you can hear a little bit of hum. But thoughts about the following: amps are half the instrument. Well, the speaker is the end goal. Everything that we do, I've got this bit of wood and metal with some strings on it, and whether I use my thumb or my finger or a piece of plastic or a piece of expensive plastic, you know, to move that string, which excites these coils on these things and goes through all this stuff and then goes through all the amplifier, all that is to move the speaker. So what speaker are you moving is very important. Because I can have the world's best guitarist and the world's best guitar, let's pretend that those things exist, going through an amp that I just sweated over every detail and it's the best I could possibly do. Just, oh my God, it's so perfect. And then I put that into say a Celestion JTM45. It's going to sound like ass because that speaker sounds like ass. However, I put it through something that has a blown burnt out voice coil or a torn speaker, it's not going to sound very good. If I put it through like what was the thing that the Custom Classic used to ship with, the Wharfdale speaker, it's going to sound kind of tubby and small. C12K from Jensen, another example of a horrible sounding speaker. But you put that with almost any good speaker, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, that's the best guitarist in the world, playing the best guitar in the world, you know. Let's see. Well, I'm sure that we'll just put this down. Well, I'm sure that most people watching these videos are better than I am, or at least more technically adept than I am. I know an awful lot of chords, though I forgot the Steely Dan progression earlier. I can criticize your songwriting more than you can criticize my playing. But I have a lot of professional players who are clients. People who play with names you've heard of, people who play with the guys whose albums are in your collection, and they've heard me play. And they've never criticized me. That's not how their brain works. They're not coming to me to impress them as a player. You know, they're grown-ups. But we're out here on the internet, so. Yeah, the speaker makes a huge difference in how the amp has been maintained. This is, if you want to get a character sound, there are things I could do to change this amp. And I'm not a big fan of the Celestion Gold in general, but this Celestion Gold works, obviously. The amp's going to sound better, in my opinion, with a creamback. Amp sounds better, in Tom's opinion, with the G1265. I think he'd like the creamback better than this as well. But I don't know many people who should feel comfortable going to Grunes or Carter's and buying a 58 Tweed Deluxe and going out on a world tour with it as it is without going through a guy like me or a guy like Mike over PTP Amps to go through it and bring it up to this level. Or you can just get one of these that's already at this level, get a couple sets of spare tubes and a spare speaker just in case, and then another one of them because it's a world tour, and go, you know, this thing's going to hold up, you know. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. That's one of the goals. Well, you got to have the paper so you can enjoy the. Sorry, I'd have to tick that other box on the ad approval thing, so I can't complete that joke. I don't like the sound of the C-Rex and other cannabis speakers, the hemp cone speakers. I think they're a little too dark and a bit gimmicky. Other people love them, so you know. Pearson says his Princeton is 2950, hand-wired 64 is north of 3K. Well, the hand-wired 64 is a piece of shit. And the PCB is 1500 plus, and we'll take a dump. Well, it's less likely to take a dump than that hand-wired one. And you can get a used PCB 65 reissue for less than 1500 and spend $200 making it pretty much bulletproof, which is what I recommend to people. So his Princeton Reaper is 2950. So yeah, the 64 hand wired that Fender offers for over $3,000 is garbage. If you can go get the Princeton build that Mike does at P2P Amps, it costs less than the 64. It's actually hand wired by hands that know what they're doing. It's going to sound better and last a really long time. And you're not going to be paying for any bullshit other than paying the guy who knows what he's doing to do the work. So, you know, what's valuable to you? You know, there's lots of ways to save money in the world. Not all of them actually save you money in the long run. Thanks for joining us, Martin. Yeah, the AC50 is pretty much turned out at this point. I'm going to get a little bit remaining noise out of the normal channel. And there's going to be some silver bullet that's going to make the entire noise level come down. Clint, the owner, sent this baffle board that he traced the old one out and drilled it out. And I installed a place here where the power cable could be retained, because I had this installed and I took it off to do some more work. And the rear panel, someone added a 1/4-inch jack, which is a shorting jack. I'm going to redo some of this wire that's not so pretty in here, give it a little bit more length to make it easier to take apart the amp if necessary. It's got a mystery XLR here that was never, or hasn't been soldered in a long time, and these XLRs are not connected, and they're missing some screws. I'm going to see if I can find some missing screws for that. And I shielded it, so that might lower the noise a little bit. Let's see. Yeah, Wes, the thing is, we're old. Hey, Kat, thanks, man. I say, man, for all I know, you're a woman. I don't know. Though you look, if that's you in the thumbnail, that guitar makes you look masculine. I don't know yet because I've not gotten the photos back. I got an email yesterday, right 5 minutes before they closed for the weekend, that my photos and scans are ready. So Monday morning, I will find out. I did, however, get this little adapter to put this lens on the Fuji. I've been using it. It's 75 mil on the Fuji. And the picture in the thumbnail was one of my tests of the lens. And the lens is great. And since all I know is that I owe them $27 for development and scanning. And since I'm paying for development and scanning, odds are they came out to some degree. I'm not, there's always that concern. Is it just going to be black because it didn't load right on an old camera or whatever? I assume that they would not have done the scans if it was just a bunch of black. And they didn't call to say, hey, man, these things are all awful. But it was my first roll, just some triacs. And I wanted to check for light leaks and shutter drag and all these things. As far as I can tell, all the speeds are reacting correctly. But I won't know until I see, because I don't have a tester. Here's 1 second. And here's bulb. Yeah, West, 1960. So I was shooting most everything between 125 and 1,000 as far as the shutter speed. And I was all over the place with the aperture on it. And I was trying to expose everything over by one stop, knowing that I could develop in Lightroom afterwards, or print in Lightroom afterwards. Yeah, Cats, yeah, I have no need to test the slow speeds yet, other than they seem to work pretty well, I mean, I can do one now, but I don't have a means of verifying that 15th of a second is a 15th of a second. That sounds about right, but I won't know. But unless I get a tripod, I'm not going to be shooting this much below, 60th. The 125 is more my realistic aim for that. But yeah, the picture in the thumbnail, I was very pleased with the depth of field and the clarity of it. The thing I found on using that lens on the Fuji is the Fuji has a really good and usually a very accurate focus peaking for manual focus. And with this Voigtlander, for instance, it's spot on. But I took a lot of pictures with that lens on the Fuji using that, and they were all just slightly out. So I turned that off and just made myself really focus on visual confirmation of and then they all came fine. And I think it's just because when you mount this, the lens is just enough farther from the focusing plane that it throws off the inbuilt stuff. All the stuff designed for this camera works great with the manual focus assist, the red peaking, but things we learn. But it's much easier to learn on digital than much cheaper to learn on digital than on film. So Monday morning I should find out if the thing's any damn good after all. What was that the Mike puts on the back side of the chassis? It's just some felt strips. You can probably get it at any fabric store. It's just some, looks to be about 1/8 inch wide felt strips just to so the rear panel doesn't vibrate. Hey, Sire, if it's not a stupid question. If amp overdrive really is the best, then why do people worship overdrive pedals and technically solid-state clipping circuits? Isn't it a compromise to some effect? Well, there are things that you can do with a big muff that you can't do with a tube amp. A big muff does not sound at all. Just a second, I'm having a YouTube error message. A big muff does not produce a sound at all like an amp produces. And so there's a reason that I used to make the 3.14. What is this saying? YouTube is not receiving enough video. What? Enough video what? To maintain smooth streaming. As such, viewers, huh? And yet it looks like it is. I don't want to open a widget. Go away. Anyway, what was I saying? Sorry. Go away. I don't want to know about you. So there are characters you can only get with a tube screamer. The characters you can only get with a big muff. There's characters you can only get with a fuzz face. And there are certain sounds that you get better versions of with an amp. You can listen to early Zeppelin. You can kind of tell when it was a fuzz face or it wasn't a fuzz face for him. It was the tone bender versus when it was amp overdrive. So it's good to have options. But for an awful lot of players today, they can't say, I'm just going to go into this AC50 and turn it up to 7 or 8 because they'll get evicted from their homes, their apartments. They'll get divorced. Their boyfriend will leave them. The club owner won't hire them ever again. So you have to be able to get some of those sounds we like from records without playing it. We're not Led Zeppelin playing Wembley anymore. So an overdrive pedal into a clean amp at a moderate volume is really useful. And you can get some really good sounds. But it's important to remember that there are different, you're either going for a very different character, tube amp versus some kind of pedal, or if you're using a pedal to sound like the tube amp, there's usually some amount of compromise. And that can be whether it's using a blues driver to make it sound like you're playing an old tweed amp, even though you're playing into a Princeton, or that can be using a Tonex or HX amp. None of them are perfect. Many of them can be quite good and very useful. So, the real thing is to ask other players. For instance, Diego here, Alan in Berlin, has my 3.14. You can't hear me? Just one second. Test. 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 Well, this sounds good on my end. It may be problematic out there in the internet. Okay, but ask Alan if he's still here, Diego, what he thinks of the 3.14, because it does sounds that you cannot get from any amp, and that's why I wanted to have one of those. Let's see where I scroll by mistake. There we are. Sorry. Well, Wes, I got the Tri-X as a baseline test. I knew that if this camera... Let me try something. I knew that if this camera did not work with Tri-X, I had big problems. And also, the Tri-X was relatively cheap. I think it was $8 a roll for 36 shots. I expect I will probably not be a long-term Tri-X user because I don't like grain, that much, or I'm not chasing grain the way a lot of people are today. So I'm looking at some of the other stocks. I think FP4 is going to be the next black and white I try. But if I'm happy with the first roll, I do have a second roll of Tri-X to go out and try to really take good shots with. Then I'm gonna try some color stuff. Of course, they just rebranded all the stuff from Kodak. So I don't remember is it called Ectacolor this week. I was gonna get some Portra 400 for the first color roll. Yeah, I'm looking at 100 speed films for my black and white, but 400 is useful to have. The light's not always up to 100. Martin paid £25 for a blonde tremolo head in '75 in McCormick's Glasgow. Well, what is that when you adjust for inflation? That's like $400 or $500, though, right? So. Well, Pastor and anyone else, if your sound goes away, if the video really gets glitchy, or if anything drops out, leave and come back, because often it's a server connectivity issue on your end or between your end and my end. That sounds awful. But as far as I can tell, the health of my stream has been pretty good the entire time. What is my favorite solid state amp? I don't have one. I love the idea that, hey, if I have a gig tomorrow and I don't have an amp, I could pick up a used, what's it called? Boss Katana 50 for like $300 and do a gig, and it'll work. But I've never played a solid state amp that made me think that's the one, I need that, or that I even want that. There are solid state amps that interest me, but I don't love them. I like some certain of them, and I understand why they're useful for people. But as far as something that I want, I've never played one that I want. I certainly would say JC120 would be way the hell down on the list. Buckingham Bar Tri-X is only available in 400 as far as I know. Though technically, I think it's really more of a 320. But I was shooting it at 200 just to get that one stopover exposure to make sure I didn't have wasn't losing any details in the shadows. When I don't know how they're going to scan it, but I'm going to make it look as if it were done at box speed. I'm just going to bring it all down by about a stop, and then I should have good detail in the shadows without any mud. It's not going to be overexposed looking. Hey, entirely unlike tea. Well, I did a 2 streams ago. I did a fourth hour talking about photos I've taken this year. But if you go to Flickr.com, I don't have a link to give you, but Flickr.com, then look up Lyle Caldwell. You'll see everything I've taken since. Well, not everything I've taken, but everything that's worth looking at twice since August of last year. FLICKR.com. It's free. Thank you very much. Oh man! All right. While we're waiting for other questions, because I told you guys I'd do 3 hours, I want to give a shout out to longtime member, though he's not here today for some reason. Rhythm and Bites is his username on here. His name's David. Real nice guy from Brooklyn, living in Atlanta right now, I believe. But he sent me a bag of the coffee his wife is putting out by Little Waves Coffee Roasters. This is the Mocha Java, which is 50% Mexico, 50% Ethiopian, and it's peaches and cream, floral, chocolate aftertaste. And I get a little bit of the peaches and cream from it, but yeah, it's pleasant. It is not bitter in the slightest. I don't get the chocolate aftertaste. I don't. There's a chocolatey quality that I love in a lot of roasts. That's kind of the aftertaste of drinking hot chocolate. I don't quite get from this. I don't find as satisfying as some of those coffees, but I think this would be a really nice morning blend. My wife loves it, and I quite like it. I'm not shitting on the free coffee he sent me, but this is a medium roast, a beautifully balanced espresso blend created to stand alone or punch through milk beverages. I'm gonna play around with the brew strength of this, but I am brewing it at it was 190 or 200 degrees, so I'm not boiling the damn stuff. My initial tastes were very pleasant, and I enjoy that it doesn't have that bitter sourness to it. And I'm intrigued enough. I might order some other coffee from them to see because this is not the only flavor that they do. But it was very gracious of them to send me this as a thank you for doing the channel, and so I'm very glad to promote this. I think it's a very nice coffee. I'm just being honest that I like that that chocolatey burnt sugar taste that some coffees hint at. But this is really good. So if you're in the if you want whole beans done right, this is a good choice. Check out Little Waves and tell David I sent you. Let's see, where were we as far as questions? Tube Echoplex or digital? I've never played a digital Echoplex. I played solid state and tube Echoplexes. I played lots of digital delays that kind of sort of get into Echoplexy territory. But I would not mess around with an Echoplex these days. It's so expensive dealing with all the tape and all that, and keeping it working is really difficult, even for guys like me. I'm a big believer in digital pedals for delays. The trouble is a lot of digital delays have a hiss, high noise floor that lots of reviewers just pretend isn't there. Either that or they're totally deaf and they're reviewing gear. It's possible. Wes, I dare ya. I dare ya. Yeah, no Starbucks notes of char. Man, Starbucks burns that out of their coffee. I don't know why. Maybe they think that makes it authentic. Their lighter roasts are okay if they're not doing the ones that are like notes of citrus, grapefruit peel nastiness. I only drink Starbucks if I'm stuck in a hospital for some reason. That's the only coffee on offering besides the rock gut that they have down in the cafeteria. But I don't go to Starbucks in terms of, hey, let's go get some coffee. I know where I'm going. It ain't there. If you're Midtown, I love Java Cabana and I love Otherland's coffee. Both much better. Infinitely better. Though I used to go all the time, and then with COVID hit, and And now the coffee is so goddamn expensive because it's a good thing we're not buying that Colombian coffee anymore. We're getting good old Iowa coffee because that's how tariffs work, right? Coffee is so expensive. I don't go to buy it very often. I'm I'm having a lot of it at home. I did buy a good coffee maker though. I admit I had to grind this in a Mr. Coffee grinder because it's the one we have, and it was not James what's his face approved, but it did the thing. Let's see. Oh, avoid B52 amps. Sorry, official Wikipedia. Yeah, I had one that came in, and the output section had caught on fire because the way that they did the traces too close together on the PCB, which was not rated for the current of the tube, and the entire section of the output board had caught on fire. And the kid asked me if I could fix it. I said I can, but I'm not going to, because if I fix this side, the other side will catch on fire later because the board was designed so poorly. And the thing sold for new less than 2 hours of my labor. I said, I'm sorry, it's dead. Buy something else. Save up and buy something better. There are places that are trying to sell you a free lunch. There's no such thing. B52 is junk and should be taken off the market. It is not safe. Aside from the fact that it's not safe, it is going to be a waste of your money because it will die. It was designed to die. It was built to be landfill. Sorry. It's not me being a snob. This is me being a reverse snob. This is me trying to protect those who can least afford to waste their money. And it's just a waste of money. Hey, Matt. Weber, this in there isn't doing it for you on your Brown Deluxe. What was some more ZZ Top? Well, have you tried a creamback with it? Creamback or ET65 would be good choices. Yeah, I remember that Deluxe. Yeah, the Weber Alico is the authentic sound, but it does not mean it's the right sound for you. I'll give you a call. We'll talk about that. But yeah, I imagine. Check out the video I've got up on the Sur Ombre. John put a Celestion V-type in the Sur Ombre, and on paper that did not make sense to me, but in reality it sounded really good. Check out that video, see what you think. That'd another reason to check out the V-type, and I really like the Creamback 65 with that, and I like the ET65 with that. Those are my choices. Starbucks is close to the worst coffee on the planet. I have to admit, I have always wanted to try Tim Hortons just to know. All right, Canadian friends, am I missing out? Is Tim Hortons something I should experience, or is it just like McDonald's coffee or something? Hey, yeah, I only shoot this occasionally, but I like the back to basics digital aspect of this. It doesn't have auto ISO. Um, I'm alternate between aperture priority and manual shutter speeds. It's really difficult to use. It doesn't have a lot of dynamic range, and so when I get good results with this, I feel like I've earned it. Mostly, I'm shooting the XE5, which is just phenomenal. And I've got assortment of lenses. And a lot of times I go out with these Voigtlenses with the manual focus. And I have auto ISO set up, but other than that, I'm controlling everything. And I find that this is my baby Leica in the same way that the Canon P will be my baby Leica. And this is the more flexible, the most flexible digital camera for stills I've ever used. And remember, I've got a Sony FX30 that I'm shooting with, and I have used it for stills photo. I only just have the one zoom for it though. So this is the FX30 is the same sensor as the A6700, which is a baby A75. There are things that I wish I had the A6700 for. It has certain strengths. If I was doing wildlife photography, I'd want the A6700 over the XE5. But walking around, just in my mind, I'm Cartier-Bresson with this little thing, and no one even notices it. That's the one I find inspiring. Modern, tiny little digital with good glass, manual focus glass. And thank you very much, Entirely Unlike Tea. Let's see. Yeah, I was looking into the conical grinders and all that, and then Nikki saw the price of them. She's like, if you're gonna grind beans, you use the Mr. Coffee. And as I don't have a couple hundred extra right now, I'm probably gonna just, most of the time we buy pre-ground coffee because we're schlubs and we're saving money. But if I get the good stuff, then it is a shame to pour these into the Mr. Coffee, which does not do phenomenal job, but it does the job. I was able to taste the coffee, and it didn't go bitter or anything. French press, you have to have it ground right, and it's a pain in the butt. I've got a OXO, the OXO coffee maker. Doesn't overheat the water. It's very simple. It works. Before that, I had various bronze that were always a little overcomplicated, had features we didn't need, and heated the water too hot. Brought out a lot of bitterness, and the OXO is really good. It's not a cheap device, obviously. Harlow hand grinder, 27. All right, Wes, I'll look into that. I've got to actually have a really nice coffee grinder. It's a Turkish coffee mill, but it grinds coffee way too fine because I'm not making Turkish coffee at home. But it's fantastic for pepper. So I've got it loaded with peppercorns. Let's see. Hey, goody. See you on Flickr then. Cool. Best band out of Athens, Georgia. Well, that'd be Flat Duo Jets. Everyone knows that. I guess you'd have to be an Athens person to get that joke. But let's see where we're at. I got a vote for Hortons here. That's good. One vote for. All right, so it's on the donut, similar to Dunkin' Donuts, so drinkable, but not something I'd seek out. Thank you, Buckingham. Yeah, I'm tickled by my cameras. I mean, the Canon with 50 millimeter lens, both my Canons, each with a 50 millimeter lens. I got each one of these for $300. So this was $6,000 if you adjust for inflation when it was new in 2005. I got the camera and lens for $300. This will do everything a Leica M3 will do. And it has a self-timer, but the Leica doesn't have. And yeah, it's not quite as nice in some ways, like the rangefinder is a little less versatile, but it works fine for 50 mil. But $300 versus $3,000, you know. So yeah, I wish it were rounded. Yeah, I wish the strap lugs were on the sides instead of the front, but not enough to pay for the Leica version. Hey, Peter Perrone, bought a pre-owned 68 custom Vibro Champ. When I powered on, there was a noticeable hum, not volume white noise. Is that normal for this amp? Bad transformer? You could have well, It's not normal for there to be a bad hum. You could have a bad tube in your amp. There's always going to be a little bit more hum out of a champ than there will be out of an amp which has two 6v6s or two power tubes. But you shouldn't be having a bad hum or noticeable hum. Noticeable depends on how hard you're listening for it. Is it interfering with the sound as you play, or is it just in the background and it bugs you that it's there? There will always be some hum with the champ or other single-ended amp. Without hearing yours, I can't tell you if yours is normal. Does it start louder and then get quieter as the amp continues to power on? It's probably not a transformer. It's almost never a transformer. It's usually tubes if you have that. Thank you, Cats. That is the goal. As long as it works. I have a Tweedledee 5E3 clone. The volumes don't interact like they should. The unused channel only affects the used channel when turned up to 12. Also, cathode resistor is 470 ohms. Seems high. It's pretty high, but I don't know what the B plus in that is. I don't know what transformer they use. 450 seems pretty high. 470 seems pretty high. 250, it's 250 to 300 is the more typical range. But I don't know what their voltages are or what else they might have done in that amp. The channel interaction is misunderstood on 5E3s. Here, I'll do that. Right now, I've got the normal channel off and the bright channel at like 3.5. So almost 10 o'clock. I'm gonna go over there and play a chord and turn up the normal channel, the bass channel volume until I hear a change. I'll let you know what I find out at. All right, on this healthy 5A3 over here, very similar to your Tweedledee, I don't hear any interaction until the normal channel gets up to 9. That's 9 out of 12. Remember that the dials on these things go 1 to 12. So I think what you're experiencing is normal. Yeah, go away, YouTube. I don't want to insert an ad here. So I think you're fine. The cathode might be biased a little bit cold, but might be perfect depending on what other factors are in the amp. Well, David, if your old color film's been in the freezer all this time, it's probably fine. If as long as it would be overexposed a stop per decade. Wait, you never got it developed. It's probably just hazy fuzziness now. Probably bad, but you can find out. Their interactivity is not so much from the cathode on the 5E3 as it is from the way the channels are mixed. I don't think that's it. You just get a little bit more voicing control with a split cathode. Yeah, if your film's been exposed but not developed, it's probably bad. But if it's not been exposed and it's just been sitting around, it may or may not be good. If it was kept in the freezer, it probably still would be good, though you'd still want to expose a little bit more, about a stop per decade. Wow, Pastor, I got the Flat Duo Jets poster on your wall supporting the Cramps. Awesome. I have not heard Elephant 6. No, sorry. I've not been in Athens since like 1990 or 1991, but I miss going to the varsity. Let's see. Do I have any thoughts on Buddha amps? They're okay. I don't think they're great, but they're good. I think they take a couple of shortcuts that I'm not a big fan of. It makes the eventual service a little bit longer than necessary, but they're not bad. Yeah, it's got this. The viewfinder's got 35, 50, 105, but I can't. I wear glasses. I can't see the 35, and the 50 is kind of at the edge of the thing. Um, I want to if the film comes out of this thing and I love it, I want to get a 28 eventually. I'll have a little external 28 mil viewfinder up top. It works fine for 50. I'm not going to be using it for 105 of this, but I can't use it at 35 with glasses. It works fine. It's just a little distracting. I actually use the 105 lines as kind of an almost rule of thirds guide within the 50. I thought about the OM1 or the OM2, but I decided to go even older. I used to have an OM3, I think, in 83. I got one for my 12th birthday. I think that's what it was. It's been so long I don't remember. I thought about getting an OM1 or OM2, and if I get into film, maybe I'll get one because they're also inexpensive these days, and they're beautiful, good cameras. But something about the old rangefinder, it's just a certain aspect of romance to it. As long as I'm not overpaying for it, I'm not deluding myself that I need to take out a loan and get a Leica. Because I also know that my little digital is going to do better for my purposes. Got a 68 jazz bass with original electronics, and it has a ground hum when I roll off any knob. If I roll off all knobs to the same degree, it quiets down. Two things. A jazz bass is not wired the way we're used to, where you roll the volume off and then the output to the amp is muted. So on Strats and Tellies, you roll the volume down. Is not just that you're not sending as much signal to the output of the amp, but the input of the amp, but the input of the amp is actually grounded out. On a jazz bass, when you turn the knobs down, the input of the amp is still a meg away from ground. So a jazz bass in traditional wiring is traditionally noisier anyway. Second of all, like a Telecaster, you got two single coils, and each single coil has 60 cycle hum. Go to the middle, both pickups on together, it's quiet, which means as you have individual volume pots on a jazz bass, as you roll one pickup down, the other pickup is still full volume. So whichever volume is still full volume, whichever pickup still has full volume, you still have 60 cycle noise. They only cancel each other out if they're both putting out at the same level. So that's one of the tricks with jazz basses. That's why a lot of jazz bass players will have that changed out to have a volume and a blend. That way the volume pot, when it's off, the amp's muted, and the blend brings, there's always a trade-off with single coils. You're going to have, unless both pickups are on at the same level, you will have that buzz with a jazz bass. So another reason people like to have noiseless pickups installed in jazz basses. That's what the thing is. Hey, Jeremy Ross, the blown fuse is usually a sign of something more serious. Now, very occasionally, it can be a false failure, and there's nothing wrong with the amp, but the fuse went. But I don't want people to take away, this guy on the internet said, if the fuse blows, it's probably just a bad fuse. Let's keep using it. That's the sign that you need to have the amp checked out, because it is probably a sign that something is seriously wrong. And under no circumstances should you say, well, it blew a 2 amp fuse, let me put in a 4 amp fuse. Always keep the same fuse value. If it blows again, you definitely have something wrong. But honestly, the fuses that we use are called slow blow or time delay fuses. And they are designed that if there's a little bit of overcurrent, they don't trip, but if it continues, they do trip. But every time you have that little bit of overcurrent situation, it's like they get a little bit weaker. And so they get stressed each time that happens, and eventually they can't come back from that, and then they do fail. It's like a light bulb with a little filament, you know. But we're about to wrap this up. I'm going to get to the next screen. But take blown fuses seriously. I always do an awful lot of verification before I say, "Yep, it must have just been an old bad fuse," because it's not a thing I want people to recommend to people. Let's see. Make sure I've not missed anything else that I absolutely must answer. Yeah, Bartolini needs to take care of the hum. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap this up here. I appreciate everyone being here. Appreciate all the questions. Remember, if you want to try some good coffee, Little Waves Coffee Roasters. Very nice people. Thank you, David. Say hello to your wife, and thank you for both from me and Nikki. We appreciate the note. I'd hope to be able to thank you in person, so to speak, here. Maybe I'll have to give you a damn call. Anyway, see you guys, and Sun Tzu. I'll be looking for you in a little bit. Thanks.